How is Spain actually going to recover if she stays trapped inside the prison of the euro? And this, I think, is the fundamental mistake. Even on your side of the argument, you should be recognising that some of those countries should never have joined the euro, and it'd be far better off for the people to leave it.
The trouble with Nigel and his nihilist approach, which is basically we just pull out, I think it's basically dishonest.
Timothy Kirkhope has been a member of European Parliament since 1999 and is the current Deputy Chairman of the European Conservatives and Reformists.
Honest in their position, always has been and always will be. They have nothing else. There is no alternative for a major economic power like
Global
the
free
UK.
trade, Tim. How about that?
Yes, yes.
The Commonwealth,
it sounds very
free trade
trite.
with Europe. Better than this, isn't it?
Trouble is, Nigel, you're like a market trader. You're not offering a guarantee, and your product's going to fall apart in a few weeks.
I don't describe myself either as a Eurosceptic or as a Europhile.
Born in Newcastle, Timothy is also a lawyer and a former Member of Parliament for Leeds North East. In European Parliament, he represents Yorkshire and the Humber, and can be seen here speaking to people from his constituency.
Less red tape and so on. But at the end of the day, I very much hope that the country will decide to keep us in the European Union. My ancestors from the North East made their money out of shipping, out of trading with the world. Because the only way that our country really made its wealth and its connections was by going out and actually meeting people around the world and being part of alliances, trading agreements and so on. And therefore, to turn us round and say we can now do the exact opposite and succeed does seem to me to be far-fetched, frankly. I support very much free movement in Europe, because that, of course, is helpful to British people as well as to anyone else. I am not part of this group that say, help, January the 1st, we're going to be completely deluged with people from Romania and Bulgaria. That's a scare story being put around by one or two newspapers, because, to be frank, ladies and gentlemen, we already have quite a lot of people from Romania and Bulgaria in Britain, and they're there because they're there under various schemes. They're either there because of education, they're there because of the seasonal workers scheme, which is something that our farmers have relied on for their labour, frankly. You talk about pearls. I mean, you know, we swim at Nid Hall. I can tell you now, really, the leisure industry in our region would not exist. It wouldn't happen had it not been for young pearls, actually, in the last 10 years. When I was in London, when I was in Westminster, I regarded MEPs as just absolutely appalling. When I came to be an MEP myself, of course, my mood changed. But I've never moved away from what I believe is correct, and that is that the national parliament, as it were, trumps us. It should have it should have more of the power, as it were. And that is that's the case. But I think our national parliamentarians are quite nervous of us, sometimes jealous, because we are, to their eyes anyway, taking a certain amount of the democratic accountability and democratic power. But fair enough, we are democratically elected. I think we have a very valuable role here. I went to Buckingham Palace last night to meet the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, who were having a reception for MEPs and MPs. And I had a chat with the Duke of Edinburgh and then quite a long chat with the Queen. I used to be her Vice-Chamberlain when I was in Westminster. So I used to go and take a report to her every day, or send a report every day, on what was going on in the House of Commons. Anyway, I saw her last night and I was talking about Europe with her. And she was interested to know what people actually thought about Europe. She's a very charming lady and enormously hardworking, and I was deeply impressed by the fact that she and the Duke of Edinburgh, who are not exactly spring chickens, as it were able to work the room with a couple of hundred people there. They worked the room for about an hour and a half, or nearly 2 hours, wandering around, talking and showing enormous interest in people throughout the whole process. Very impressive.
Did you ever have more of a Geordie accent when you were younger?
No.
Being born in Newcastle?
No. My voice
or a
was
more
actually,
northern one?
if anything, less northern than it is now. Actually, people who understand, I understand all about accents, will tell me that when they listen carefully, some of the vowels that I pronounce are flattened. So there is a northern thing. They can tell I'm from the north. An expert on speaking can tell I'm from the north.
We are voting the follow-up to the delegation of powers. We're starting to vote. Amendment 4. Those in favour?
Committee meetings quite often begin with a voting session whereby MEPs who are members of that committee can have their say on certain law proposals which have been initiated by the European Commission.
Those against? Abstentions? Adopted. 7. Favour.
If adopted, a proposal is judged again at a final vote in a full plenary session.
8.
If rejected, however, a proposal goes no further than this committee room.
Against?
A show of hands is often clear enough to decide the outcome, but in case of uncertainty, MEPs must use their electronic voting machines to help clear any doubts.
Now the vote is closed. 24 against 18 is adopted. It's adopted. Now, Amendment 9. Favour. Against. Abstentions. Adopted. Amendment 2. Favour. Against. Abstentions. Adopted. Amendment 3. Favour. Against. Abstentions. Adopted. We're voting on the amendments. Amendment. Compromise 1. Favour. Against. Abstentions. Adopted.
It's finished.
We're drawn. False.
Final
So
vote.
let's go for the final vote. The text. Okay, final vote. The vote is open. Now. Closed. 42 plus 0 abstentions. None against.
We are deeply embarrassed, deeply concerned by the events that have been taking place in the seas off European shores.
As always, voting eventually gives way to debate. Today's discussion is about migration across the EU's external borders.
It is our member states themselves that have to decide what it is they want in relation to saving lives. But at the same time, there has to be alongside a much stronger initiative by the EU towards the sources of these problems.
In light of this tragedy, Timothy shows his support for the European Border Surveillance System programme, which would provide high-tech border security and introduce further measures to block immigrants from entering Europe.
But we were deeply concerned, particularly with Libya, the fact that certain despotic regimes were actually putting people into boats and sending them across the seas so they would land on the coast of Italy or Lampedusa or at Malta. This was a disgrace, and I was not convinced then that the European Union had done nearly enough to exert pressure on these regimes. I still don't think we have, and we have a lot of levers available through our various association agreements, finance agreements, and support grants and so on. We don't use them. Let's use them.
Happy with the preparations for America and what you need in terms of the notes?
Well, there's this question mark still hanging over the American trips.
Really?
I mean, I have to go anyway now because I've already committed, and there's no way, you know, if you've got a ticket to go, you can't cancel it without a massive loss. So the answer is that
Business trips for MEPs often go beyond the weekly toing and froing between Brussels and their constituencies back home.
Yes.
It is the job of their assistants to ensure that travel arrangements run as smoothly as is humanly possible.
Parliament's office.
Yeah.
I'm going to be in some difficulties over this, as you know, and but I'll be out there in America already.
Okay.
So we'll talk about the other detail that I wanted to discuss on that another time.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we should be ready for it. And as I understand it, I'm going to be speaking in the cybersecurity questions.
Data, cyber issues, yeah. Well,
That's the American one, the US delegation one.
Yeah.
Is there worry that not enough people across the UK know really even who their MEP is?
That's true. A lot of people across the UK don't know who their MP is, or their MEP, and even their councillor. And this is the fault, of course, of the system partly, but it's also the fault of the individuals. I mean, I had a name recognition thing 4 or 5 years ago, and I was very pleased to say that mine was one of the more known names as an MEP, certainly in Yorkshire, which is good. But I mean, it is difficult. I mean, you're representing 5 million people in a geographical area of 4,000 square miles. You can't be everywhere all the time. And, of course, the media tends to report what MPs say, or even councillors, the local media, rather than MEPs. So it's a tricky job.
a more trivial question, if you like. Can you tell us a little bit about your interest in film and any acting you may have done?
I've got a bit of a background as an amateur performer. I've also got a background as an amateur producer in theatre. I set up a drama society in Northumberland when I was living there. And one of my specialties is production of modern comedy. When I was at school, I was in charge of sound in the theatre. And I produced the first cascading sound effects in a play in about 1960, 61.
So you've always been quite creative, should we say?
Yeah, in that way. I like the theatre. And actually, I think the job we do, politicians, it's all a little bit to do with showbiz as well. We are actors to some extent. If you keep proportion in this and keep your sense of humour, which actors have to do as well, then you don't go far wrong. People who have no sense of humour coming into politics might as well forget about it.